It's sunny here in West London, so I'm going to say welcome to everyone and thank you so much for giving up your sunny midday kind of slot, whether you get lunch or not, to come and spend some time talking to us. Some of you know me, some of you don't. So I'm Rachel. I'm both a coach and the founding partner of Motion Learning. And I'm also, some of you know, a woman on a mission to ensure that we provide high quality, really effective, and hopefully transformational coaching to people within organizations. Now, I don't believe that everybody needs a coach, but I do believe quite strongly that it would be great for everyone to have access to one should they need a coach at any stage in their career. So I hold a client list of my own, specializing in coaching leaders across all different organizational levels, one-to-one, in groups, across teams, and I also head up the coaching team here at Motion. Now, talking of my team, I was going to introduce you to my colleague Raki today, who is a coach with us and a former talent director, but I'm afraid she can't join us. She's had an unexpected family situation arise and she's had to go and give that her attention. But she does say hi and she sends you big apologies. She'll do a webinar with me in the future. So it's just me, but you'll be really relieved to know you're not stuck with me alone, because we've two amazing ladies who are going to be by my side from the Body Shop. And I'm so pleased you are here today. So we've got Sophie, Peaty, and we've got Sarah Shaw. So Sophie, can I ask you to introduce yourself first, please?
Sure, thanks Rachel. So hello everybody, so lovely to see you all. I'm Sophie Peaty. My role is the Global Leadership Development Manager for the Body Shop. And just a super quick intro into how I got working with Rachel. We ran a leadership development program last year that was focused on leading high performing teams targeted at our regional manager populations. We wanted to support them with the upskilling and embedding. And as part of that, we wanted to use coaching, which is where we worked with Motion Learning. But I do have to say as well, Rachel, your mission of the woman on a mission to bring in transformational coaching. I think Sarah and I are on a bit of a secret mission ourselves at the moment, in as much as possible trying to bring coaching into our own culture. And it started with both of us gaining our own qualifications as part of that journey. So we're so excited to be here because we also are women on a mission, I think. So a great place for us to be with you today. Thank you.
Well, Sophie, I'm so proud of you too. You know that. So thank you very much indeed. We need brilliant people like you. Sarah, could you introduce yourself, please?
Of course. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah, so I'm one of the regional managers who went through Sophie's programme, and then I experienced three group coaching sessions throughout that with Rachel as well, and it really helped bring a better understanding of the learning from Sophie's programme along with the coaching with Rachel, and I'm in the middle of doing a coaching qualification myself as well, so it was also a great experience for me to get to see the amazing Rachel in action as well. I got loads of notes from you too, so it was fantastic. Yeah. So yeah, I love the coaching, and getting to spend that time was just amazing. And having the two together has just been fantastic. So thanks for having me here today.
Oh, you're so welcome. So ladies, you've got slightly different perspectives on the topic we're talking about today. So what I'll be doing is I'll be sharing some information with the rest of you, and then we'll be bringing you in at different points in time just to kind of share your perspectives. So we're going to have a Q&A section at the end, depending how much time we've got left. And so on that front, if you do have any comments or questions, requests for information, feel free to stick things in the chat, because we'll kind of take the questions from the chat. And if there's anything in there we don't get the chance to answer here while we're together, then what we will do is we will be sure to kind of answer it and share our responses to everyone outside of this call. So let's get on with our topic. Today, we are here to talk about how coaching, particularly coaching, can dramatically increase any return you might see on formal training programs that you run within your organizations. And it makes sense for us to start just by being crystal clear about what coaching is and how it differs from training, because both are deeply effective learning strategies, both have a place. And although there is some slight crossover, they are fundamentally different things. And you may be very familiar with this, but in case anybody is unsure, Training is typically about knowledge transfer, and it often, not always, but often takes place in a classroom and in a group setting. So for example, a trainer might work with a group of line managers to share principles on, I don't know, something like how to give effective feedback. And this knowledge might be transferred in a one-off session through things like discussions, activities, a bit of trainer input, and maybe then things like role plays. Coaching is more focused on the individual, so much more focused on their needs and their personal transfer of the formal learning that they've received. So if you've learned about how to give feedback in your training, brilliant starting point. Coaching steps in to talk about how you apply this learning to your particular set of circumstances. So for example, as coaches, we'd be exploring how you feel about giving the feedback, how you think the other person might react to the feedback, maybe how you might navigate that, the impact that it might have, and so on and so forth. So in coaching, we kind of take the learning, we take the learning principles, the skills, the framework, the knowledge, the understanding that's been given, and we extend it out to the individual person and to their differing and very real situations. Now, Sarah, you were an individual on a program which used coaching to do exactly this. Is this what your experience was like?
Absolutely. So when in the classroom, everything made sense and I thought I got it all in theory. But then when we did the coaching and I had the coaching with you, you linked some of those experiences that I was sharing in our session to some of the learning that we've gone through in the training program. And I think sometimes it's when you can really relate that to a real life situation that it really embeds. And I think once you can do that, that is learned forever, and you can then use it in your own job role further. And it really helped me to be able to take that learning and use it more authentically, because I was able to better relate where I could utilize that in a situation, rather than just trying to throw it in there because I was trying to practice. It was really, really transformational, really. And one example in particular was through when we were learning about transactional analysis, and it made sense at the time in theory, but then when we had our coaching, I'd realised that there was a time where I wasn't in the best of spaces. And when we discussed it, I had a moment with you when we spoke about like the different states, like child states and parent states. And I was like, wow, okay, I thought I understood that, but now I've just applied it to myself. I really understand that. And then it was just really great to then see what relationships that I could work on. And one of the things that I personally was working on was being a bit more assertive, but it also made me more aware of my relationships with other people and my language that I was using and how to get the best outcome from different people that I was working with. But if it wasn't for the coaching side of it and really realizing in the moment what how that knowledge had transferred into it, I don't think I would have been able to use it as effectively.
Thank you, Sarah. And it's really interesting, isn't it, this notion that actually taking something quite big and bringing it quite deeply into your specific situation, and the potentially lasting, that kind of stickability principle of that. Do you know, there's loads of data out there, and again, we can share information with you, but you know, a recent report by so the Personnel Management Association found that individuals increase their productivity by an average of 86% when training is combined with coaching, compared to just 22% with training alone. So training is a great thing. You want to maximize it. Adding that coaching in is where you're going to get that exponential kind of increase. So there's a lot of data out there, as I say, that reflects that pattern. And in this webinar now, what we're going to do is just to move on a little bit to give you our views on why we think this is and why we think it's worth considering using coaching to really maximize the impact of formal learning for people. And we're going to start by building on what we've just been saying about this principle that we believe very strongly that there are lots of different reasons why coaching is not just a bridge, but actually quite a critical bridge between the classroom and the day-to-day work of, let's say, a line manager. And we summarize, I suppose, in 4 key points, because we believe that coaching allows the learner to, firstly, apply their learning. Secondly, it allows them to customize their learning. Thirdly, it allows them to reflect on their learning. And fourthly, it allows them to receive support as they continue to learn. So just taking them one at a time, we've touched on this first point already. So this idea of the application or the transfer of learning. And this is really important, as many of you know, because management modules often include really critical input on core skills in areas which are continually coming up for line managers, such as delegation, feedback, communication, and interestingly, much more recently, including things like a line manager's ability to coach their own people. So it's increasingly more common for people to have modules around coaching themselves. But theory and modules, though useful, and role plays and practice, again, a great way of trying to bring things to life, they do, we all know, have a limit, and they can get stuck in the classroom and fail to transfer to everyday behaviour. And what this means is we end up with like a theoretical cognitive kind of dissonance, which only gets tested at the point that it's actually needed. And that's going to be in a real life situation. So I've learned about feedback. Now I've got to give some feedback. Oh, crikey. And that can be quite a big gap for people. So one of the things that coaching aims to do is to bridge this gap by saying, okay, we've got the principle. We are anticipating the situations. Let's see if we can bring these two just a little bit closer together, ensuring that the learning's applied, it's embedded before the moment it's needed. Secondly, coaching acts as a bridge because it allows people to customize their learning from the program. And this is what we've just heard from Sarah. Hey, so we're all individuals. And in my experience, there is very rarely one way to do many things when we think about interpersonal dynamics and the way we interpersonally connect with each other. So for example, we can all be taught how to lead, but our leadership style we know will develop in personal ways, making it authentic to us. So through things like our values, through things like our strengths, through things like our own vulnerabilities, our own kind of style, preferred kind of way of leading. And coaching plays a huge role in this. So in coaching sessions, for example, we work with people to take their learning about things like, you know, leadership styles and explore what it really means to them, knowing who they are, who the people in their teams are, and what their organization is like, encouraging them to be, I suppose, much more intentional and much more engaged in the actions they take as a result. Coming to our third point, we believe coaching kind of is this important bridge because it allows the learner time to reflect. And as a learning professional, and many of you in the on the webinar today are learning professionals, we know how critical time to reflect is, and we know how often people are starved of time to reflect. Often in demanding roles and busy lives, you know, things really get in the way of learners taking time to pause and taking time to reflect on their learning outside of formal program modules, taking time to reflect on their learning from experiences. I've learned about feedback, I've given some feedback. Okay, now let me reflect on how that went. And learning can get really easily lost this way. Coaching by nature forces a reflective pause. That's what we're there to do. We're there to say, take a deep breath, take a pause, let's get off the treadmill for whatever period of time it has, and let's bring your attention to your learning. And let's bring your attention to the application and the impact that learning is having. So asking questions like, you know, what does that really mean for you? What was the impact of that really for you is going to do things like increase depth, awareness, and the likelihood that new behaviors will really start to be developed and embedded, actually, which is clearly what most of us want. So finally, I just want to highlight this thing about continued support. So the fourth point is coaching being this bridge because it's this continued support. Now, I'm cracking well and truly into middle age, and I've done a fair amount of learning now, and I'm sure there's a lot of learning to come. And I know that learning, and some of the best learning I've ever done, is tough, but it's not perfect. It's not a linear thing. And it can leave us feeling really unsure, really exposed at times, because that is the very nature of it. We have to feel learning, and we often feel it in sometimes an excited but quite an uncomfortable way in order for us to come out the other side. And I don't know about you, but I feel it's so much nicer if I'm not by myself while this is happening. And coaching is a really key way to ensure that this isn't the case. It's realistic to expect that at times it can be challenging for individuals to stay things like intentional, energized, and motivated to try new things as they move on from a program. But it's so much more effective if they have someone to share that with, someone to support them as they are going through that process themselves. So 4 ways we know that coaching is a deeply effective bridge in transferring learning from our classrooms into our workplaces. Now, I'd like to bring our guests in again now. And Sophie, if you don't mind, I'd like to bring you in because you hold the commissioner's perspective on this. And I'd like you to share with our guests here today how coaching you feel helped your colleagues bridge this gap between their learning experience, which they had with you, and their real life application and practice.
Absolutely. So quick bit of context, the programme that we ran consisted of 3 modules, each with a 4 to 6 week gap between the modules. So we were able to utilise coaching between those gaps, which was amazing because they could attend one session and then they would have a coaching, attend another session. So it was constantly being discussed and built, and through that process embedded, so much more successfully. It gave them the opportunity to discuss and work through any barriers as they came quite live as well, which could have potentially impacted their success. They could reflect on changes that they had been making as well, pushing themselves to succeed even further. So it really gave us that platform to continue the learning in between the modules and beyond. I have to say as well, it also provided me support as a facilitator, because one of those biggest challenges when you are delivering program is that embed and follow up, especially when you don't work with the people on a daily basis. So Sarah and I have worked with each other actually for, I think it's over a decade, so it's a long time, but we don't work together on a daily basis. So actually staying close to the actions that they're doing, the successes, the challenges, it's really difficult. So knowing that they had that continuous support and that partnership with Rachel through the coaching was so valuable. Another thing that I've sort of thought about is the training that we're doing with leaders is much more emotionally intelligently based now. So it can be a lot more about self-awareness. And as you said, Rachel, it can be quite confronting. It can be quite difficult for people in that space. And I have to say, I feel like we went quite brave with the training. We did create that space of confrontation. We did talk about, parent-child cultures and challenges and relationships and having difficult conversations and giving feedback and growing your own coaching skills. And I don't know if I would have felt quite as confident that would have landed as well as it did without having that ongoing coaching support, because I knew that we could set that space, that really psychologically safe space within the workshop, but then they continue to have that support and continue to apply it and learn from it and grow with each other as part of that ongoing learning. So it allowed us to probably push the confrontational aspect in a positive way slightly more than we would have done without having that coaching.
Yeah. Sophie, you raised something that actually really strikes a chord with me, which is I hadn't until our program together been quite so clear about how it was going to support our dynamic as well. So me as the coach and you as the deliverer of the training and also one of the commissioners of the coaching, and we'd contracted for it with with people like you, Sarah, and with your colleagues, but obviously that ability for themes to be fed back as well to the organization, which we used, didn't we, to then inform, and you used to inform your content on a modular by modular basis. So you had a beautifully open-minded approach to it, which was, we think that we're going to be going here as far as content is concerned in module 2. But when feedback themes were starting to come back to you, you were like, actually, we've got a slight shift. We've got a slight slant we want to put on this now.
Yeah, we could react to it and use that data to inform the learning. So it was so helpful in that respect, and give people what they really needed, and we can try and we can make those informed decisions as well as we can, but to literally have the information was really helpful.
Yeah. Now, Sarah, you've already given us some examples, but I don't know, as we're talking, if anything else is springing to mind about kind of how your coaching helped you to kind of deepen this impact, again, this principle of acting like a bridge.
I think just as Sophie, you were talking then, I was thinking about the timing of the programme as well. It was just before Christmas, so in retail, it was our peak time. Things were changing, there was so much going on, and I think it's very, very easy to just jump straight back into the day job again and to get carried away with, okay, I've done this learning, but I'm so busy with all this other stuff I need to do, I'll come back to that later, and almost forget about it a little bit. And I think if we hadn't have had the coaching, there would have been a big chance of that happening, because we were going through a period of a lot of change as well at the time. So I think it was just so valuable. And it really helped us take that quality time to think about the long-term impact of not focusing on the coaching, on the learning, and how that was going to help grow us as leaders as well. But if I think back to that transactional analysis that I was talking about earlier as well, it made me realise again the self-awareness on my own well-being, and how my own well-being was being impacted at the time, but not realising that when that happened, I'd gone into a bit of a child state and almost saw my workplace as the parent, and it was almost that parent-child culture, but in my mind, and that I realised that I don't do very well if I'm not in an adult culture. It changes me, it changes my behaviours, and I was able to then use that to identify that in other people. And so it was really, really quite powerful. I learned that it was quite challenging to hear. At first, I kind of felt a little bit like, oh, I'm being a child. It was called out, but in a really helpful, supportive way. But honestly, so our last coaching session was back in January, and that still carries through with me almost every day. Just that one example, the impact that that's had on me personally, and with all of my my team as well. I have 19 teams that report into me, so I work with a lot of people, and it's those people skills that have just increased dramatically. And it is through the coaching really did bridge the gap between the learning the theory and actually putting it into practice as well. And it also helped me to reclaim my power as well in a way that was really positive and helpful, rather than if I felt like a child, rather than going into more of a challenging and disruptive reaction to things. It really helped me reclaim that power and make sure that I was still behaving and communicating in a really positive and helpful way.
Thank
you. It's helped all round.
I'm sure any of you listening to Sarah speak here can't imagine that she's disruptive or any of those kind of things. She's just a complete delight. And Sarah, thank you for sharing some quite personal things there as well. So, really do appreciate that. So let's move our thinking just on a little bit. We've got this principle of coaching being arguably a very effective bridge between the classroom and, the reality of everyday work. But now I think let's just turn our attention to something slightly different, which is, the cost. Let's talk about the bottom line, because I know that many of you on the call today are commissioners of learning activity, and we know from working with people just like you that investment in learning is certainly, and quite rightly, something that has to be carefully considered, and return on any investment has to be really clearly evidenced. So I suppose what we're just going to share now, or I'm going to share, is some tips about how, or tips to maybe help you think about how you might win the argument with your brilliant, because they will be brilliant colleagues in finance, I'm sure. So I suppose my initial thought is to say, consider group coaching as an alternative to one-to-one coaching or one-to-one activity if budgets are tight. Now, we often think of coaching as a one-to-one activity, and it's very effective, but we are less likely to think about groups coaching as being something that can be done in groups. And if you are unfamiliar with this principle, I'm just going to take a moment to explain what group coaching is and how it works. So group coaching is where we get more than one person coming together in a coaching session. And these people are typically not part of one individual team, but it's more likely they're going to be people who are interrelated. So, for example, like Sarah and her colleagues, a cohort of senior area managers on a training program together. And people who have been through a training program together as a cohort often then can enter coaching together as a cohort. And what we tend to do when group coaching is we work with people in groups of usually no more than 6. Sometimes they're closed groups. So we say we're going to work with just these 6 people over a series of sessions. Or sometimes, like with Sarah and her colleagues, it was across a much wider cohort of 16 people, 15 people. And we started to kind of, they would move around the groups as we went through the coaching sessions. And what we do is the coach will take people one at a time, and we give them some focused one-to-one coaching time while their colleagues are watching and while their colleagues are in the room and listening in. And then we repeat it with every person until everyone has had some focused time to explore something that matters to them. Now, to make this effective, obviously, the coach has to be really, really careful in contracting incredibly safely to ensure that things like psychological safety is high. So things like confidentiality put in place, guidelines put in place, boundaries put in place that everybody is happy with. But it really is a really effective way of maximising the benefits of coaching on a budget. And if you want to win that argument with the finance department, it's easy to demonstrate that group coaching will allow you to make your budget go even further. And a series, for example, of 3 coaching sessions for a manager on a one-to-one basis might be anywhere from, 1.8 to £2,500 per person. By contrast, for a series of 3 sessions for a manager in a group coaching scenario, you're looking at about £1,000 per person. So that's a saving of anywhere between about 45 and 60%. And you know how significant that becomes when you're thinking about the development of teams of managers. Now, from our side, if you want to know more about the specifics around fees and how to make the most out of your budget, your best bet is to speak directly to my colleague Howard, and he'll be sure to share his details with you in the chat. Now, alongside the financial benefits of group coaching, there are also some other major wins to be had, not least that learning in groups really increases because individuals are listening to each other. Relationships are strengthening by listening, by talking, and by sharing. And Sarah, I do want to bring you in here again, because I think this was a really powerful byproduct for you guys of the group coaching sessions that you took place in. Can you tell me, what was your experience like being coached in a group? Because it can be quite exposing.
Definitely. I think, if I'm being really honest, at first it was quite nerve-wracking and a little bit uncomfortable because we're kind of north and south. So the north will know each other really well, the south really know each other well. North and south didn't really know each other all that much before. So to then be all mixed together in these groups and being so vulnerable with each other, it wasn't massively comfortable at first, but then Rachel, you were amazing and you made us all feel so comfortable, and we did all open up. We built trust with each other, and I think that the contracting piece at the beginning, creating those boundaries, maintaining confidentiality, it really helped us understand each other better. We've been able to identify where we can support each other more. We're spotting changes in behaviour with each other and recognising when somebody needs more support. And I think it was nice because we were able to just take some time and get to know each other better. And not some of the things that we were hearing, we'd also experienced it. So sometimes we, in our roles, because we manage our teams and we're all managing our teams separately, sometimes we're going through things and we don't necessarily realise that we're all going through these similar things. So it was a really good way to bring us all together. It made us much closer as a team as well.
It was really interesting, and you guys, and I've seen it in other group situations as well, but you guys, there was a real sense of people might start with one thing that they felt they wanted to explore and then it would be like, actually, having heard Sarah just talking about what was important to her, I'm experienced something like that, quite similar too. And what I started to hear with you guys over time was you saying, okay, well, maybe we could do something together on that, and maybe we could pick up on that again together. And it was this kind of heightened and quite surprising level of kind of unity that it felt like it brought to you, but very uncomfortable for sure. It's quite a challenging thing to ask managers to kind of be part of.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sarah. So Group coaching can be a really great way of demonstrating return on investment. I think another thing that coaching can offer you from a return perspective is to do with kind of increasing the kind of coaching capability within your own organizations, because the process of providing your managers with coaching also is going to build their own capability as they move forward. So let me just take a moment to explain what I mean here. So many programs, as I mentioned earlier on, now have coaching as aspects of their module content, which I think is a great thing, you know, how to coach as a line manager. And it is increasingly, in my experience, being considered a core skill in a line manager's toolkit. When I started my career over 20 years ago, it wasn't really talked about. Now I think, you know, along with feedback, along with delegation, coaching principles sit kind of right up there. Now, we can learn about the principles and the rules of coaching theoretically, but it is an experiential activity. We are practitioners. I am a practitioner. We learn by doing our practice day in, day out, minute in, minute out. And the only way to truly understand what it means, in my experience, in my belief, is to experience it. So whether in one-to-one or in groups, if you expose your managers to being coached themselves, they're going to begin to understand how it feels. It will deepen their ability to replicate it when they themselves are required to coach. So you're increasing your internal capability. Now, Sophie, was this an aspect of your thinking when you chose to add coaching as an element into your wider program?
Absolutely, that was one of our sneaky kind of things that we hoped that they would get out of it as well, because as you said, upskilling on coaching was one of the topics that we covered as part of the modules on leadership development. As facilitators, we tried to use a coaching style as much as possible as well. So we literally tried to pepper as much coaching as we could. As we said, women on that mission to get coaching into the business. So we tried as much as possible. And as you mentioned, you know, the cost benefit was one of the reasons as well. But the biggest factor was the opportunities for the team to witness great coaching in action and hear how they could support each other. And that was just so valuable. The other thing that I think was really helpful was actually clarity on what coaching is. It can get a little bit confusing or diluted within business sometimes. Some people think it's just giving feedback in a nice way. Some people think it's, you know, showing people how to do something, but in a way that's not quite as obvious. So actually that real clarity on what true great coaching looks like was so helpful, and it's continued to help us since, because we've got that starting point. And the other thing I think is that retail can be such a fast-paced environment, and you can inadvertently create this culture where managers can be more directing and want to fix problems, but it's with such great positive intent, but it can actually start to hinder the growth of their teams and of each other. So actually stepping back and seeing how they could support each other with the use of coaching, this has had a huge impact on how they lead their teams, as well as the type of peer support that they provided. And I think from my perspective, embedding coaching skills into the culture takes time, and it is quite difficult to do. As I shared earlier, I have my own coaching qualifications and I'm currently doing further ones, but actually getting the kind of impact that we wanted to achieve would have been so difficult for us, you know, for our small team to do. So getting that support from yourselves and using coaching in different ways across the entire journey of learning was such a huge help, and had so much more positive impact in the results that we saw. And even listening to you talk there, Sarah, that shift in the accountability and how you're all supporting each other, it took it away from us as facilitators and absolutely kept it in that group. So I believe that it had such a huge positive impact on the return that we saw from this program.
Oh, thank you, Sophie. And Sarah, from your perspective, did you feel like you understood coaching more having experienced it?
100%. And again, like I said earlier, I'm in the middle of doing my my coaching qualification as well. And so I took so much from it, and I've really tried to now embed this into my region, like into my store teams as well. And I've tried to really change some of my ways of working. So rather than doing, you know, our performance-based reviews each month, I will do an hour coaching with each line manager. So every line manager gets that every 4 weeks. It's an hour to really put the focus on them. So it's all about them and what they want. And I have found that since doing that as well, I'm seeing so much return as well, because they are so much more accountable for their own, they're coming up with their own ideas, they're following through on their actions, they're getting great results, and just the engagement, the motivation, the enthusiasm that I've seen from my team as well by using all of this and implementing all of it has just been absolutely incredible, because we've been against some quite challenging situations, like in our geographical region as well, and so to be able to still get all of these positives out of it is just brilliant, and the resilience that everyone's built up from it as well has just been invaluable. So I'm just so pleased that we've been able to do that, and going through the coaching myself has really given me you know, the tools to be able to then use that and hopefully try and replicate some of what you've done to justice and
Sure
take that with my teams. It's been great.
Do you know, full transparency, everyone, Sarah told me the other day that she changed her weekly one-to-ones to a coaching session with people, or a monthly one-to-ones with a coaching session with people. And it really made my heart sing, because it's just, that's such a big shift, isn't it? It's just a big shift. And you were saying to me, so I say to them, okay, so what would you like to bring today? And sometimes they'll bring business as usual stuff, which is kind of great. And it will be, but actually sometimes they won't. But they will bring what they feel they need your support in and what they feel they need to talk about. I think it's brilliant. It's great. So thank you, ladies. Now we're starting to come to the end of our time together, and you know that we think coaching is a wonderful bridge, and therefore a great thing to consider from a transfer of learning perspective. And you can see that we also believe that actually you're going to, if you want to evidence your ROI, it is there to be evidenced. I've had the chance to ask Sophie and Sarah some questions, but I feel like I'm quite privileged with that, and I wonder if anybody might like to ask any questions themselves. I'm going to be quiet for a moment, which, as you know, if you know me, is quite rare for me. So take a moment, and why don't you stick it in the chat? Hopefully I'll be able to see what happens in the chat. Any questions that come up, and then what we can do is we can start to answer them. Now we have to hope a question comes up. We feel like we should have planted one. If you want to take yourself off mute, I guess you can do as well. It just, your voice will be heard on the recording.
There is one there for you, Rachel. It may not have come up in your feed.
Oh, here we go. So do you feedback to the organisation about what comes out of the coaching sessions? Really good question. Thank you for that. So yes, we contract for it. So, and Sophie will give you her perspective, and Sarah, I think you can maybe give a perspective on this as well. So for me, I contract with my commissioner, who is the client, so who was Sophie and some of her leadership kind of peers in this situation. And I agreed with them. They said, can you feedback themes to us that come out of the coaching sessions? And I said, yes, I absolutely can feedback themes. They will be anonymous, and they will be themes across all the different groups that I'm running. And I will say from this round, these are the key themes that came back. So maybe one's around communication, or one's around how, you know, kind of interaction with their own leaders, and so on and so forth. And in all of the one-to-one conversations, I contracted in the group conversations, I contracted and said, I will be feeding back themes, but you will not know, people will not have anything named, and I will make sure I run it past you before I feed it back to your business. Now, Sarah, was that okay as the person whose feedback was then going into this kind of shared themes? Did that feel okay for you?
Yeah, it did, because it was themed, because it was anonymous as well, and you would email, you'd have all of the themes there, you would share it with us beforehand. So if there was something that we weren't quite happy with, we were able to say, but I don't think there ever was a situation where we weren't happy for it to be fed back. And it just felt really safe to do so. And, you know, the fact that it was being fed back, it meant that people had to listen to it as well. So it was really empowering, actually.
Yeah, I got the impression you guys were quite relieved some of it was being fed back as well via this channel. And Sophie, for you, was the feedback kind of coming back to you? I mean, we've talked about it being useful from a content perspective of what you put in the next modules. Was it useful in other ways?
Yeah, I think it absolutely helped us to inform the content, but also whenever we fed back, we did that in partnership, Rachel, as you said. So whenever there was a feedback to stakeholders within the business, it would always be myself and Rachel delivering that feedback. Myself, I was able to do similar with regards to how the experiences that we had within the leadership sessions. So what had created great engagement? Where did we need to focus a little bit more? What would further developmental opportunities be? And then linking that back with Rachel. And what was quite interesting here, Rachel, was I know we've got Sarah from the UK here, but we actually also worked with our North American market. So we were working across a couple of different markets, a couple of different cultures. So it gave us the opportunity to see what was needed, maybe more locally specific, but also from what was the similarities across the two cohorts, and what sort of business-wide cultures did we need to consider. So that was really helpful, linking it all together and really contracting and working together through that whole process, including the feedback.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Gary, you've asked a question. How do you get all individuals comfortable in group coaching sessions, as that can't be easy? No, it isn't easy. And I think it's not a one-pronged attack. So they were given information about coaching beforehand. I'd done a video about group coaching that everybody had got access to. Love doing a video. I'd done a video about coaching that everybody had got access to, so that they were familiar with me. They'd heard my voice. They got a sense of what I was going to be like. We'd been really transparent and upfront about how it was going to work as well. And also, Gary, what we did was, in the very first session with everybody, we spent quite a long time contracting, so possibly a 20-minute period, Sarah, and if that's quite a significant period of time in these shorter group sessions, contracting about what do we need to have in place to make this feel right for you. And we agreed, for example, that anything that stayed in the virtual room was within the virtual room. I was crystal clear in writing about what I was going to be feeding back and how we were going to feed it back, and the process that it would always go through the coachees first of all. And I think it was through a combination of different methods. I think that was the way that we did it, but it isn't easy. And much of it, again, relies on the coach. How do we as professionals enable people to feel safe enough to talk to us, by being trustworthy, by being watertight, by being clear, by being transparent, and by contracting really, really, really safely. I'm very mindful of time, and I can see, Colin, you've asked a question for Sarah, but what I'm going to do, Colin, we're going to have to take that one as one that we take with us, and we will definitely get you the response to it from Sarah, and we will make sure that we share that with you and we share that with everybody else as well. I've got to draw it to a close. Thank you so much, Sophie and Sarah. We could always do this for longer, but thank you to you two for coming. I love hearing you talk. And I think to have you two qualifying into this profession, whether it ends up becoming full-time work for you in the decades to come, or whether it stays as kind of part of what you do now, I think is just wonderful for all of us and wonderful for our profession. Thank you, everybody, for taking this time to come. We know that time is very precious, so thank you for taking some time to sit and to listen, and hopefully we've given you some thoughts, some got your grey cells going a little bit. We're going to share this recording with you. Share it widely with your own networks. If it can be a benefit to anybody, please do. We believe in generosity. Share it away. We'll share a link, for example, as well, to a case study that we've written, which demonstrates the approach that we've been kind of discussing today. We'd love to talk to you more about it. If you've got any further questions, you want to ask us anything else, get in touch with us. You can always connect with us on LinkedIn, or you can sign up to our newsletter as well at motionlearning.com. I think that's everything. I'll be told afterwards that I've forgotten some things.
I know, but I think we should, if we can get Sophie and Sarah's answers to the last couple of questions, then hopefully we'll be able to share that with everybody as well.
We will do that.
That would be great.
Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Sarah, especially for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Have a great day, everyone.